So next, I'm going to probably say way too much about Israel. So, like a lot of things going on, it's a complex mixture of things there. And as far as who is leading the nation now and who lives there now, we're not even sure genetically what's going on. I think it got to such a debate that they don't allow genetic testing there a lot, and then what they do allow, it's censored. You're not going to get the full idea, as far as figuring out what's really Hebrew or not. One of the things we need to understand about it is we are directly in the season, in the generation of Antichrist. If you think about the ones that were in charge whenever they did that to Jesus, it has only grown. It has only escalated since then. That may explain a lot of things that you're seeing today. A lot of times he told them there were good leaders. There were good leaders that came to him, that helped him with his burial, that got saved. It's always like that. It's not really smart to get to start ranting and raging and being angry and come against this or that or the other and generalize and it's all this way. That's not smart and it's not accurate. But I do believe that there's some groups that you could say was along with the ancient Babylonians that maybe interbreeded even with something that I don't think we should say much about that, but if you know, you know. Um, and and that way, if you say anything about this is wrong and that's messed up and not happening right, a lot of people talk about the synagogue of Satan thing in Revelation 2. If you know about that, then you have a label that you're against God's people. So it's tricky these days. You guys probably already know, and you're probably already being quiet. You have to choose your battles, but one pattern I do see is it's like what L.A. Marzulli said in his book Cosmic Chess Match. I recommend that book because he goes down through history how God's true chosen people were always heavily battled and heavily persecuted, killed horrifically. I think it's still going on today in the Strip, by the way, that's a lot of God's people there genetically. Right before big prophetic things, like you could say the Holocaust, right before the state is set up, it's always a lot of lies, confusion. You could say interbreeding attempts in order to confuse and to ruin the plan of God. And that's what he calls this cosmic chess match, back and forth all through time. And that's a good study, and it's a good study of Israel too. So I would just recommend that book to describe what's really going on here. That, in other words, I would not trust the leadership just because we're supposed to be a certain spiritual way. I would know them by their fruits, and I would understand what time it is. And I wouldn't trust because they endorse or condone a certain leadership that they put into a temple and say we have to worship that and the system it comes with. Look at what the Bible says and do that. If you look also at the time frame, see, I've studied this. That's part of why I got hit so hard. I've been studying this time frame. Like I say, about 170 years ago is when and a lot of other people have picked up on the time frame also. These systems have always been working in the world to um, do certain things for the enemy on Earth, different areas, different projects, but it became a global Antichrist project about 200 to 170 years ago. So that's where you saw assignments all over the world. We have to run the wars, the institution, the technology. We have to put tech everywhere, industrial revolution. This goes a lot deeper than probably anyone knows to study. Banking, entertainment, governments, we're having to work with the technology that we have, the populations that we have, because we have this short time frame to put in this system. We have to take down the old paradigms of Jesus Christ, completely confuse all of that, bring in spiritisms, bring in a lot of trauma, mind control, and bring in these government systems in, and bring in the Hollywood and all of this, and to warp and to satanize. And there was like Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Aleister Crowley. There's a lot of different ones that spiritually were behind it too, and that just numerous ones that too numerous to talk about, and ones we don't even know about. But the you can see where we are now. You can make a study of it. About 170 years ago, we had to put evolution into the schools. We had to make everything about science and shame the Bible. And it used to be really bad until the newer generation of people saying that that's obviously wrong. But the people that were put in charge of this, though, guys, were not necessarily Hebrews. These were more like your old Babylonian sorcery. Some of them probably did take over Hebrew families, because one of the theories there is that um, the oracles come through these bloodlines so powerfully. There's something spiritually different about it. This goes back to, like, remember, I think it was Jacob that knew how to manipulate the genetics of the cattle from his stepfather. And it's just like certain giftings, spiritual giftings, knowledges, understandings, and practices and power are in those bloodlines, because that's where Jesus came through, and because that they're supposed to represent humanity. It's kind of like they are the Levites of the earth. They're supposed to represent humanity in that area of the world for the holy things of God. And so I think that can be hacked and hijacked for the other side too. So, yes, their bloodlines probably got infiltrated the most, if not with other genetics, with sorcery. And so, but that's not all of them, see, or even originally them. And so it they end up looking like it's only them, and you're blaming them and saying this is all one group, but it's not, because this is the best explanation I've been able to come to of why the Bible is true, but why we're seeing certain things the way we are right now. And this, once more, is too deep and long of a conversation to get in with most people that are mad about one area of the world always being behind stuff and doing stuff. But that's not the true story. A lot of times the true story is complicated. It's complicated. But that's why you see them being, or things that look like that group being assigned so often everywhere. They're assigned over leaderships of the world, but their names are changed everywhere. The names are, and this is not just that group. This is also the secret groups. They like to adopt their children into other families, and that children takes on that name, so you can't follow what came from where and who's doing it, and changing the names and washing the names or whatever. But this is deep topics, but that's just kind of an idea of an understanding of how. In other words, the only reason I'm talking about this is that if you just use common sense of who's doing wickedness here and there and the other, including killing the Jews and holocausting them and doing the pogroms and all of it, if you start looking at who's doing a lot of crimes and pushing the Antichrist system and promoting it, it'll leave you scratching your head. It'll leave you scratching your head of why. Um, how can the Bible still be true, but this is happening too, unless it's something like this? This is exactly how the enemy would work to confuse people, and hopefully that made enough sense without saying too much. Um, I do believe that it is very valuable what happens in Israel. It's not all messed up, and it's not all perfect either. It's always complicated. That's why, we have full permission to never worship the Antichrist or take the mark, because it's going to come down to that part of the world, and those people are telling us to take the mark. And we have full permission to say no without we're hating a certain group. It's very important and godly. This explains, like, this cosmic chess match is still going on. It's like the most evilest group would want to establish Israel right now to have full control over everything that happens there and the earth as Jesus returns. They would want that passionately. So that's part of why they did it. And trying to hack it and hijack it ahead of time. The world wars were super important to set everything up like this and to set up this time frame of the Antichrist moving in. That doesn't mean that it's not holy. It makes it difficult by design to appreciate the holiness and the importance. And there are scripture verses I think I'm going to get into here later. I think it's Hosea chapter 6, where it kind of hints of, in other words, the setting up of Jerusalem. Just because all this is going on that I'm talking about does not mean that the setting up of Jerusalem is not legitimate, it's not important, and it's not of God, and that this is not God's ordained times and His ordained prophetic times. That's still all true too, and it gives God glory. One of the things that always threw me off about it was it talked about God's wrath coming into His face to defend them. And that's probably, we need to be careful, and that's probably still true now to a large degree. But those specific times too, where it talks about God is really coming, is completely defending, completely protecting and helping a pure, innocent people that's a lot more innocent and along with God, accordance with God at the time. If you study that out, I'm going to get into that more later too. I want to get more into that, especially if I do the Bible studies. That it may happen more than one time, but the main time it's talking about is at the end of the millennial reign, when Jesus has been here running things for a while, where it is more innocent and it's not an Antichrist system. That's whenever this Ezekiel 38 war they're talking about, everybody wants to say, is that happening or about to happen? It may be another double thing where you see something that looks kind of like it now, but I believe the main time that that's going to happen, because it's multiple times in the Old Testament talking about this Ezekiel 38 war and the things that happen in it. It happens at the end of the millennial reign. That's whenever Satan is let out of the pit to go around and collect all of the people who are going to be against that godly system that had been there, and it's going to be a great number of people that follow Satan. And they're going to come against Israel at that time the most. I think that big war, I could be wrong, because this is something I'm not super rock solid about, but it really looks like the major big Ezekiel 38 war happens at the end of the millennial reign. Certain aspects of it seem like they're echoed like in the Battle of Armageddon. So I think that could be the double thing there. But one of the things that keeps the end time events confusing to people is they're trying to put stuff in that don't necessarily go in at that time. So that would be something that could be clarified and kind of put to the side of where it really goes. And so people tend to want to either worship everything that happens in Israel and it's beautiful and important and agree with everything and go ahead and take that mark of the beast, man. Worship the Antichrist because Israel is God and perfect. You've got that extreme. And then you have the other extreme where they're just wanting to just say it's all illegitimate, don't give it any honor. So both sides to me are not the balance. It's not correct. But one of the ways to realize the information war there is if you go to the extreme of, well, we just have to throw it all away because it's infiltrated right now. Well, you can't. There is a war to try to make Israel look completely illegitimate. Like, don't even dig around the area because then you're going to find artifacts that prove that Israel existed thousands of years ago. I mean, you've literally got people saying that. They never existed. They shouldn't have existed. That's just not the truth. I think what we're seeing now, what part of how we should see it as, is it's the promise of the glory of God was meant to be there. And of course it's been battled for since that started. But it gives God glory. It shows God's plan of salvation. It proves that Jesus is true. He is the Son of God and who He said He is, and that He is coming back. And there will be There will be a lot of fake things set up first, though. And so, just staying with the truths of the Bible, that it is very significant. It's very prophetic, historic. It's important, and God gets the glory. The areas that will be built and rebuilt, it's like a lot of prophetic things in these times, and that it is significant. It will prove the Bible true. It'll prove prophecy true. It'll point toward Jesus is coming back. But you just have to be realistic that there's going to be a lot of lying and stuff going on there first. So just keep the balance of the truth. That doesn't mean we have to take a mark of the beast or something, or even go. I don't know how appropriate it would even be to go to the temple to give it honor, if it would be safe to do it, to worship there. I don't know. I'm not clear on all that, but the goal was always to destroy the bloodline so that Jesus would not be born completely this fight over Israel and over God's people and over the Hebrew people. Destroy the bloodlines, corrupt them, so Jesus would not be truly human when he was born, so that he could not be a proper sacrifice for mankind. And to ruin their reputation, to ruin people's understanding of what's really going on. So the verses from Hosea 6, chapter 1 says, Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us, and the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know, if we follow on to know the Lord, and his going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth. There's a lot of Old Testament verses that I was going through about when things happen before the Lord comes back, and then the battle that happens into the millennial reign. At the end of the millennial reign is the Gog Magog war of Ezekiel 38. At least that's the main one. It may not be the only one. It seems like it's the only one. The Gog Magog war at the end of the millennial reign, after all this happens and the Lord comes back to set up his 1,000-year rule. But you see a lot of third day risings and third day resurrection references in the Bible. I don't know of one that says 2 days and 3 days. I only know the ones that say 3 days. And I don't know if someone has already made some kind of historical significance of these verses, but the fact that it says in the Bible where it talks about a day is the same as 1,000 years, 1,000 years is the same as a day. It would be interesting if after 2,000 years Jerusalem is revived, or God's people are revived, or the things to do with the Hebrews are revived. The difference that it's talking about between revive and raised up. They will start reviving. Like, what if this means that in the 2,000 years later, they are revived, but the 3,000 years is when they're going to actually be risen up and promoted to full, glorious life. We shall live in his sight, like he's going to be here and see us living. And to me, that just would be so interesting. That it would also perfectly reflect what I'm trying to say, that we're just seeing the beginning right now, like a reviving. Like they're barely here legally. The name is here. We understand what it's supposed to be, but it's not like they're risen up yet. It's not like they're living in the sight of God right now yet. It's going to be the way it should be. It's not how it should fully be right now. It's like an understanding. It's like they're reviving. They're coming awake or whatever. So this would be like a good way to describe what I'm trying to say. Like after 2 days, or maybe after 2,000 years, they're reviving. The third day, that's whenever we'll be able to stamp of approval on everything that happens there, that is decided there, that is done there, is when the Lord is in it. Hopefully that makes sense. Seems to hint that Jerusalem will be reintroduced at the last days, say 1948, but comes to full glory when Jesus arrives. So, the truth of Gog and Magog war is the rebellion war that occurs at the end of the millennial reign, when Satan is released from the pit to tempt the unbelievers. There's several times this war is described in the Old Testament. Each time it is at the millennial reign when Jesus is already here on earth. Those times in the Old Testament talking about Gog Magog, I need to go through that. That's a whole different study. But I kept finding that it's discussing a time when Jesus is here, when it's the day of the Lord, when he's already here. So if there's a foreshadowing of that war, it would just be a foreshadowing, not a real deal. Possibly not even something that looked full. Gog Magog. And there was also parts where the parts people talk about this is just about to happen, about the horse riders are blinded and flesh are consuming in the sockets. And I think even the part where there's some kind of chemical warfare, where the people are hired to go out and mark bodies for 7 years, because people are trying to put that 7 year period. How does that fit between now and the tribulation? Is that during the whole tribulation? But that's going to be the whole Holy Land. But if it's at the end of the millennial reign, you don't have to worry about where does that fit in, if that makes sense. It seems like that's the end of the millennial reign, those parts. It is interesting how much of the Bible, after Jesus' physical return, is prophecy in the Bible. I've wondered how much of it is in there like that, is described. But these are like the tricky points that make it hard for people to study, because they're like there's so much and it all has to happen before the rapture or something like that. So even with a corrupt government, we can appreciate that uh, we're seeing the beginning of like a lot of end time fulfillment. We're seeing some um, understanding of the old glory, and the enemy is always working to try to poison that glory to us. Why does it have to include so much bloodshed and confusion and pain and difficulty? It's always getting poisoned. This glory of God is always being poisoned to us all the time. So hopefully that helps clarify things. The only reason I would even bring that up whenever it's so controversial is that that could help clarify some people for their faith. Because to me that was a what on earth is going on? How can you reconcile that? And that's what it's designed to do, is to make it unreconcilable. So next I will cover a post that I made about the third seal and judgment in the Old Testament.